How about now, Trina?
And you
Got
it.
All right.
Thank you. Perfect. It's 4 o'clock on February 28th, 2025, and time scheduled for the McMinnville Water and Light Commission meeting. And I will call this meeting to order. Clerk Trina McManus, will you please do a roll call?
Yes, Mayor Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Here.
Commissioner Elmer,
Here.
Commissioner Garvin,
Here.
Commissioner Macy Baker.
Here. Okay. The first item in our work session is the financial year 24-25 and a half year budget review. Invite Finance Director Mark Dunbar, who's already up here, to present to us.
Thank you. Wait here for Thad to get our slide up. Can you get to the first slide? Oh, that's right. I can do it. Okay, great. Okay. All right, so we'll jump in. The first thing that I thought would be good would be to just give a kind of a snapshot or a summary view of where we're at with our budget as we go through the presentation. So just kind of preview. We're in good shape. Water and light divisions. We don't have any red areas of concern. Do have some yellow areas that we are watching, but as we'll talk about as we go through the budget, those areas are largely related to capital and the timing of capital projects. So we'll talk about that as we go forward here, but kind of the in a nutshell, things are looking good for both divisions at the halfway point of the year here. So we'll start with the light division. And this slide is a summary view of our income statement with a couple of key balance sheet items that we watch. So I've got noted there the operating income and the net income, and those percentages both being favorable. So at halfway through the year, 50% of the year completed, the net income at 73%, that makes sense. But it's 16% for operating income. That one maybe doesn't make as much sense on the face, but if you note there, we had a negative budget of $855,000 loss that was budgeted. Yet at the halfway through the year, we have a loss of $137,000. So if we were at 50% of that budget, we would be at $425,000 loss. So we actually are in a much better place than we had budgeted. And one of the drivers for that is we don't have rate increases in our budgets because the rate increases aren't decided by the time we're doing our budget. Those rate increases come after. And so that's a big contributor to this. So the rate increase for the light division was 2.75%. And so that drives additional revenue in the sales, which helps our income and has helped to bring this into a better position for us for the light division. I've also highlighted a few of those percentages there in blue, and that's what we're going to talk about in this rest of the slides here on the water division. So we'll jump into the revenues. There's kind of a lot of information here. Mostly what we're looking at is the information that's on the right side of the slide here, and these percentages for each of these customer classes. But I also do these 5-year histories because we're at 50% of the year, but that doesn't mean that we are going to be at 50% sales because the consumption of power happens, it's weather dependent. And so for electric, the heavier use months are in the winter, and there's more winter months in the second half of the year than in the first half. So we end up on average being a little lower in our distribution customers, 47%. And you can see that they tend to have pretty consistent, percentages at midpoint compared to industrial customers, which kind of jump around a little more. The average is 50%, but they do jump around a bit more, and that's just driven by their schedules and what they're doing. So looking at, again, our classes here, the residential and general service, those are our largest distribution customers. Average, they're right there at that 47%. So we're right on budget there. And then you look at the industrial, and it's a bit above the average, but again, that's just, so I showed it as green, but that's just kind of how they operate. They jump around a bit. So bottom line though, on our revenues, just under 50%. We're looking real good on our revenues for the light division.
Go back to that slide and explain the yellow one down there.
Yeah, yellow one, the joint use revenue, that we don't bill until the second half of the year. We bill that late January, early February, and we'll collect that in the second half. So that's why we haven't collected that yet. That's why that percentage, that would be the, oops, sorry.
What is that even?
Oh, it would help if I got the question. I apologize. Joint use revenue is the we have on our poles, telecoms that attach to our power poles, and so we have a charge as part of our utility rates that we bill them for each contact. So
That's the dependable revenue. We can anticipate that revenue will actually come in.
yeah. Yep.
Because if they don't, then they're in default.
Does the industrial customer revenue make any difference to us? Because it's just a pass through, right?
Right.
I mean, there's revenue, part of that's the monthly fee, the customer charge, but as long as they're paying that, it really doesn't impact our financial health, right?
Yeah, and you'll see that in this next slide. I've highlighted it's interesting, the purchase power is our largest cost, and I broke it out by distribution and industrial, and you can see the distribution, our purchase power, we're about 47% of our budget, and mid 50s on the industrial, which tracks with the revenues. So you're right, it's a pass through. So on budget for our purchase power, and we do have some favorables there. I did note at the bottom of this one, the assessments and taxes, kind of a high percentage for halfway through the year, but that's because those come at the front of the year,
So,
those assessments.
so Mark, the transmission expense, that's the same, correct, as the power,
It is,
because those are BPA costs.
right. Yeah, and you can see the transmission is a little bit low, particularly for industrial. And that is the result of the peak.
We had some months where they were, we did not hit, they weren't on the system peak,
Right.
the BPA system.
Yeah.
So it was actually a lower cost.
Right. We budget as though they're going to hit that every month, but if they don't, then that's a savings for the mill.
And Mark, what assessments and taxes do we pay?
We pay the Oregon Energy Supplier. That's probably the biggest one.
ESA.
There's one other one.
Are they all to the state or?
There's some small ones, but I think you're correct. The ESA is the biggest of the group, because it's about, it was last time, I think it was $56,000. But
we also have the city economic development that's in there too. Yeah. It's runs typically around 50,000 for the energy supplier. Yeah.
And
So
the
both of
pilot
those.
expenses,
What's that?
the pilot expense is what Water and Light is paying to the city of McDonough. And this is just on is there a water side that we're paying as well?
You'll see the water, actually what the water is a a trade. And so the water, well, we'll talk about that one specifically, because yes, that is the pilot that we pay the city.
And that's from state law.
That's from state law, but the percentage, I think the minimum is 3%, and then anything above that.
6.
The minimum through the state law.
No, that would take a class, but yeah, it's just based on state law. And it's a minimum based on some factors of at least 3%.
What is our effective rate in the city? It is 6%.
Mhm.
That's across the board now, right?
That is
It's
just,
all ramped up.
that's on all electric revenue.
Even the industrial side. So if it's a pass through,
That gets added.
that
to
gets
it.
added on. Okay.
So on our non-operating revenues, this is driven by interest and some contributions. So I noted there on the interest, the average is for LGIP and treasuries is that 52.6%. So we're on budget there, but you can see treasuries is a bit low and we're a little higher on LGIP. I've just circled those. That's simply because the interest rates have come down a little bit and the LGIP has actually been above treasuries as the interest rates have dropped a little bit. So we've just kept more funds in the LGIP and less in treasuries. And that's why those percentages are like they are. But bottom line for our non-operating revenue, 58.1%. So we're in good shape at the midpoint of the year on that.
And Mark, could you explain briefly what LGIP is, please?
Yeah, it's the local government investment pool. That is, we keep funds there. It's a state program and it's basically liquid cash, but it produces real good returns for us. They're 4.85%, I believe,
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
just under 5.
Yeah, so
And that's available to all government,
yes,
state government, or
right,
local government.
yeah.
So
So
the city also should be investing in that.
yep. So our last slide here for the light division is on our utility plant and our cash. So this lists a lot of projects that we're working on. That's this side, the left side there, construction in progress. We budget, this is part of our budget. We'll talk about later here for next year. We do this every year, budget all our projects. And then we work on completing those. And so we track that and you can see actual versus our budget. And then I've highlighted a couple areas where we haven't made a lot of headway yet. The one up there, the 3 Mile Lane substation. So $800,000 budget, 500,000 of that was for a property purchase that hasn't happened yet. And then also an initial payment on a large transformer that for 300,000 it hasn't happened. So and then facility improvements down there, of course, we've been talking a lot about that. That's going to get going here in the second half of the year. So we'll have some costs coming in there on that. So bottom line there for construction in progress, we're about 25% at the halfway point with more costs that we anticipate coming in here in the second half of the year. That will drive the utility budget number up and also bring some of our cash number down. So those, it's interesting, the balance sheet items there, we've been talking about 50% is kind of the target, you'd think of during the year. Those are income statement items, but for the balance sheet items, really the target is more like 100% as we go through the year. And so that's why those are much higher in the way they are. So
On the substation expenses and how we haven't really expended anything on any of the substations, is that just because of the construction season window or?
No, because it's the property. Well, so the window shower, the 600,000, that was for the mill. And that would be there'd be a kayak at the bottom because they would pay that cost. On the other one, we haven't purchased the property because we're still doing our due diligence there. And the transformer, we went out to bid first part of the year, And we rejected the bids. And so we're gonna probably rebid that piece of it again.
But on like the Booth Bend and the East McMinnville one,
Booth Bend was breakers, and I think we just received the breakers, correct? So if you look in the yard there, we just received those. So a lot of things you'll see on here have materials of just showing up now,
gotcha.
and then construction happens. So like if you look down here at fleet purchases, there's nothing expended yet. The truck is ready. One of the trucks is ready, the other one they're working on, so we'll see those in the second half of the year. So that number will come up significantly.
Understood. Thank you.
John, could you take a second and explain why we have and why we need cash balances so large?
Sure is. So the first one is capital. So if you look at what we have in our system, an individual transformer, which I'm talking not the little ones, but the substation transformers. You remember, was it we got two bids. One was for 1.6 and the other was for $3.3 million for one transformer.
And how many in a substation?
We have 11 of those. Okay, and then the other part of that is storm. So an example would be Springfield. I just talked to their general manager last week. The January 2024 ice storm that we had, they expended $7 million in that storm for one storm. Emerald PUD, which is right next to them, I think their number was 14. So we need to have those reserves to cover those kind of swings. The other one that we have is power supply. And in power supply, in our contract, there's actually two pieces, right, Jamie? The financial reserves piece and the cost recovery adjustment clause, where BPA can increase our rates in the current rate period to recover their costs.
Our rates are the rates they charge us, not the rates we charge our customers,
Correct.
right?
Correct. So there are a lot of variables and a lot of exposure risk that we have in the electric utility, and the same in the water utility. We can talk about those in the water.
And John, haven't we also used the cash to sort of smooth the transition when our costs go up dramatically? We can afford to not have collect the whole thing in rates the next year, but just smooth it in so that it's easier on our customers, whether they're residential or business.
So we will likely see that in this next rate period with BPA. There's settlement negotiations going on, which this rate period will start October 1, 2025. And they're looking at somewhere around 8.3% on the power side. The transmission side was 23%. And so we're getting close on the power side, and then settlement discussions will start on the transmission side. And our goal is to drive those down. And that is for the 3-year rate period starting this year, in federal fiscal year, essentially, up to the end of our contract, which is 2020.
Thank you.
It did notice space what it was.
Power, is it power related?
It was, but
You remember.
oh, I remember what it was. For context, the size of our electric system compared to Springfield or Emerald that you referenced. As far
Okay,
as storm
so
damage.
our system is very similar to Springfield's. So they have more customers, but we have almost the same number of line miles.
Okay.
So they have about 31,000 customers. We have just under 18,000. Their service territory is actually smaller than ours because we have quite a bit of service territory that goes to the west into the foothills. Their service territory is like 30 square miles. So ours is about 75. A little bit different in how each of us operate. During that ice storm, they lost about 80 poles in 2 days. Basically were damaged. And we do a little bit different as far as brushing. So that's one of the things that they have a lot of their system in people's backyards, which they can't access to brush.
That was my next question, is if they're as diligent as we are on line clearance.
I don't think they are, because they have a lot of trees come down and take, well, most of it was tree related. And so,
But they use similar diameter poles and all that kind of stuff.
theirs is one class different than ours, but yeah. And we did supply materials to them as well during that extent.
And then, I think it was 2 slides back, there's a whole transmission cost that we didn't have any expense, maybe it was just 1 slide back.
Because we're gonna do that this summer
Oh.
or this construction season. You're talking about, right? But
No,
Oh,
no, it
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
that slide.
Up,
It was
That
that
one.
slide.
Yep, item, the first one, the top one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
I think
300.
we've got, what, 14 poles we're gonna do, Gene? As soon as the weather gets decent.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I got it. Great
Okay.
question, so I can understand it. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you the terminology to say it back to me. You said there was a portion of it they were raising 8
That's the
4%.
power portion.
power
There's two
portion, and then
Transmission, so we have.
what's
two
the
parts.
yeah, explain those.
So power is the power that's generated. The transmission is what they need to get the power to us.
Okay,
So think of like a water pipe, same concept.
And they didn't used to separate them out, right?
Oh, that was years and years ago. Yeah, it used to be just, I mean, like 30 years ago. But now they actually have two, what they call business lines. That was 1996. They split them. So it used to be transmission and the power were just one, it was a BPA. In the 96, they split them into transmission.
And those increases
Simpler
are,
days in your first term, Tom.
Yes.
and those increases are as a result of,
They're increasing costs.
but why?
Personnel, transmission builds, a lot on the transmission side, a lot of capital, mostly all capital there. On the power side, it's mostly maintenance, repairs. So this is, we have a hydro system, and so BPA has a hydro system. So there's 31 projects plus the nuclear plant at Hanford. And that's essentially what makes up the power supply. There might be some purchases and stuff that they do to balance things. What they do is they buy that power from essentially the Bureau of Reclamation or the Corps of Engineers. And the offset is that they're responsible for maintenance of the generating units, so the generators in the dams. And so those are aging and they're spending more money on rebuilding those generators. And so we'll see what happens here with the federal stuff going on. So that's going to be a challenge.
Okay. So for the water division, another summary income statement with a couple of key balance sheet items. And again, just highlighting the percentages for operating income and net income. And again, kind of a weird looking percentage for operating income, negative 75%. But that's simply a result of that we had a negative budget that's 648,000 and we've got operating income of 488,000. So you get the negative from the math. But the bottom line is, yeah, we're in very good shape on our water operating revenues and expenses, the operating results there. Again, the rate increase that happened in October is not included in the budget. And also another part of the driver is that we do collect more revenue up front in the first half of the year than we do in the last half of the year, because the hotter weather is in the first half of the year. The summer months are mostly in the first half, and that's when the irrigation happens. So you'll see that as we go through some of the other slides here. Net income, a little bit low, just under 50% there. The big driver of that is contributed capital. And we'll talk about that. We've got a big project that hasn't happened yet. There's a contribution there that will come in. So, and then I've of course highlighted the areas there that we'll talk about. Those percentages, we'll get into those in the remaining slides here, those percentages in blue. So for the revenues, again, a 5-year history, 57% is where we normally are at this point of the year, at the halfway point for water revenues. And our largest customer class, we're at 57.6%. So we're really right on the average. A couple of other classes were above. I've noted those in green, and the biggest one percentage wise is down there at the bottom, wholesale. That's our water sales to the city of Lafayette, and that's because they have been using additional water from us rather than the shared wells that they have with the city of Dayton. So,
And we'll talk about that towards the end of the meeting.
so just under 60% for our water revenues, with a 57%, kind of average. So we're a bit above, which is good. So we're looking good on our water revenues. For expenses, our operating expenses, some favorable areas there as well. One we're watching, and this is the city water elimination charge, or water charge elimination. But essentially, it's we bill. Yeah, that's what John was talking about earlier. We bill the city for water, but we also then don't charge them. We don't. How would I say that? We set it up in the billing software.
We write it off.
And then we write it off through this charge. And we do that because we need to track the water usage, so it's not water loss. And so we budget for the revenue and the expense, and the variation in the reason we're a bit above this time of year, at the midpoint here, is simply because there was a little bit more irrigation than than what was used prior years. So we'll probably come in maybe 230 or 250,000 rather than 230. That's what I'm kind of estimating, if the second half of the year is consistent with prior years. So
The way this started was back in 1961, there was an agreement between the city and Water and Light, where they would not pay for water, we would not pay for sewer. So what's happened over time as the city's grown and they've added more facilities, the water elimination charge has grown, but Water and Light still only has one facility. So the offsetting to that is we don't pay sewer, but that sewer is only $2,300 a year. So that's the offset. That's how that started.
So total operating expenses there, bottom line, we're at 49%. We're in good shape on our operating expenses. And our non-operating revenues, our interests were on budget there. I did note that that 1% there, that 100% number, that's pretty high for on budget, but that's just because we collect that at the front of the year, that development charge interest. And then the biggest item there that drives this kind of watching, that's 34.3% that we're kind of watching. It's that $2 million here that we haven't received yet. This is a contribution that for the pump station, Zone 2 pump station.
Yes.
So when that comes in, then that'll jump that up, and we'll be in good shape on our water revenue, non-operating revenue.
Where's the capital repayment from Lafayette for the pipeline?
It's 22 there.
Yeah, so
22.
that's the interest on it. The capital part of it is on the balance sheet. It's actually not shown in these summaries, but it's
operating revenue. Is it just a loan repayment? Is that the deal?
it's a loan payment, so it's a reduction of the liability that the city of Lafayette has.
And what's the trigger for us to get the 2 million for the Zone 2?
We're waiting for an extension agreement with Whole Homes. I think that's going back and forth, right?
It's in process.
An attorney comment.
Yes.
So last slide for the water division, our capital. So again, a list of projects that have been underway, and you can see the top one there, the raw water lines. We're near complete on that project. The next one down that I've highlighted is this pump stations, and so when that contribution comes in, we'll be able to get underway on that project and have costs come in there. And then the final one I was going to highlight, this IT purchases, 120% of budget. So it's actually, the reason it's like that is because there's a number of projects that are included in that cost that we have that are both water and light. They're shared costs, but when we have a work order that's open, we can only open it in one division, and it just so happens that most of them were opened in the water division. And so I didn't highlight it in the corresponding slide for light, but the IT is, I think it's like 7 or 8% of budget. And so what'll happen is as soon as these work orders close, the costs will get allocated between both divisions, and the budget to actual will look more reasonable than it does here. Yeah,
Could we go back to zone 2 just for a second?
Sure.
Please?
like the
In
previous
the
slide, or
The extension, no,
Okay.
the extension agreement with the city, as I recall, that the developer has to commit to a certain amount of lower income or middle.
Workforce
income,
housing, there's 20
Workforce
units.
housing. Is the city involved in drafting that part of it, or where does that agreement come in?
That's with the city. So the city's currently in negotiations with Hold Homes. I think what they're calling a development agreement.
Okay,
It speaks to those issues. But
so we're not doing that.
our
is it?
agreement with Hold will just be the extension of the water system.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But
That's
you're not
that's a good
starting that
result.
until you have the $2 million. Correct.
Yeah, that'll be under the terms of the agreement. You'll see that. I mean, you'll see that agreement come before you.
We've ordered things, right?
No. There was a 2-year window to complete, James, is that right?
Okay, right.
So final comments here is just, we're closer to our 100% on our capital for water, and we're really kind of spot on for cash. So we're in good position moving into the second half of the year with projects we anticipate will be ramping up as we get into the second half of the year. So just kind of,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Could you do the same answer about the cash on the water side, please?
I have one question.
Oh, go ahead.
On the 2550 line, the water mains, we've had a few water mains break
Mhm.
recently. Is that gonna throw that budget line out of?
Probably not significantly, because also there are big projects in that number that our crew does. So our internal crew actually installs water main too. And so we'll typically do, what projects do we have? Do you remember what projects we had?
About 4 projects a year.
Right.
5,000 feet a year.
But you're right, the repairs are in those numbers too.
Okay. Thank you.
And then going back to Tom's question about why we hold cash, same reasoning, a little bit different. One is timber revenue. If we lose our timber revenue, let's say there's a wildfire, that would have a dramatic impact on our reserves and our capital as well. And we can also smooth the rate impacts that we have with the cash too. And water, typically capital is just more expensive than the light. We generate more revenue with light than we do with water, but capital costs are higher in water than they are in light.
And John, we have a huge number of projects that we can see we're gonna have to do. They're dwarfed those $28 million number, right?
Yeah, if you go back and look at our water master plan, I think there's $150 million in there, and we have $28 million in PD bank right now. But those are also spread over 20 years, so.
Thank you.
So we're in good position, both divisions, no red areas, and we talked about the capital constraints that we have. A lot of it's timing. We do have some supply chain challenges for transformers, but overall cash skin position, and we're well above reserve levels. So we feel like we're in a good position midpoint of the year.
So Mark, this was very helpful for the people new on the commission. This is what, the second year we've done this?
Yeah, I was gonna
And-
talk about that next.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you're fine.
Mark, to tell all of us that Mark has, based on feedback from last year, Mark has added some things like the deal with, what's the average
Yeah.
midpoint over the last 5 years. That was something that was new. So if anybody on the commission has something that would make they think would make this better, I would suggest you talk to John about it and we can see if that's something we want to add, because this is a very, very useful tool that we haven't had before. And I think it makes the budget and understanding how we're doing really much easier. So thank you.
Next, so what we're gonna talk about next is our capital budget. So going back to Tom's comments. Last year was the first year we actually split the budget into three pieces. So February, we do capital. March, we will do the personnel piece, and then in April, we will do the O&M piece. And then in May, we'll bring the whole budget back for the commission to review as a draft, and then in June, the commission will adopt the budget. So James is going to talk about the first piece here, the capital piece, and both electric and water.
All right, good evening. So I'm James Burke, I'm the Engineering Operations Director here at McMinnville Water and Light. I have with you tonight Brent Scribner, he's our Senior Electrical Engineer, and I have Steve Wendell, our Civil Engineering Supervisor. This is the preliminary budget we're presenting to you tonight, so it's going to be some changes in it before you see it back in May when it's a draft. But it is a preliminary budget, and we're taking our best stab at this one. So we're still evaluating some of the projects, and there'll be some changes in it in the future here. Let's get started here. Click the top button, James. All right. So tonight we're going to discuss timeline, budget highlights, and next steps. As we kind of move through this, feel free to ask questions. I have two experts here, so as we kind of move to the discussion pieces, you may have some questions and just raise your hand or jump in there. For the schedule, we're looking at February tonight is the capital budget review. In March, we're going to come back with payroll. In April, we'll have operations and maintenance. In May, we're going to see a draft budget for commission review. And then in June, you'll actually get to adopt that budget. Our budget is a strategic budget. That's our focus, at least. We have a mission statement here. It's to provide our customers sustainable, high quality service that enhances the vitality of McMinnville. Our core values are represented through a lot of our projects: community, resiliency, people, fiscal responsibility, safety, and environmental. As we talk about the project, you'll see some of these core values in our projects. Our budget process has three key elements to it: plan, create, and deliver. So in the planning phase, that's what we're doing is planning. So we have a priority focus. We're looking at capital projects with some assumptions tied to them. We're looking at capital purchase with some assumptions tied to them and some cost drivers on there. We spend a lot of time looking at our critical features and where they're going to sit in the budget and what projects we're going to select moving those forward. Tonight, we're in the create phase. So we've identified it, evaluated, and now we're in the selection process of some of these items. We're looking at lead times, and that's what's reflected in the budget tonight. So Mark did his mid-year budget review. We're here showing you our preliminary budget. And then in May, you're going to see the draft budget, and that should have our final numbers in there. And then you're going to see in June, we'll have the actual budget that gets adopted. So our capital budget for the light division in water is approximately $11.2 million. The light division is 5.9 and water division 5.2 million. That's for our 25-26 fiscal year. The light division, we have goals of capacity, reliability, resiliency, and safety. To select our projects, we're using age, capacity, risk, and number of failures. So as we talk about some of our projects, you can kind of think of this criteria as some of our selection points on how we selected these projects to move forward. Some of the quick facts we have 17,500 meters within our system. We have 97% of our electric load comes from DPA. We have 11.2 miles of transmission. We have approximately 338 miles of distribution. It's a nice split. We have about a 50-50 split between overhead and underground, which is a nice split there for our distribution side. We have 7 substations. Within those 7 substations, we have 12 transformers. We have 41 feeders and 4,200 distribution transformers. The distribution transformers are what you see on the poles up above there. And then you also see some pad mounted ones in the green boxes there. You have any questions in that section at all? Okay. So our proposed budget tonight, we're going to talk about the transmission, substation, and distribution. Those are where our projects are kind of wrapped up in. The capital inventory piece is for transformers and meters. The general plant we'll talk about later on, that's going to be the IT budget, the fleet and facility section. And then we have the kayak, which is the contribution and aid for construction. That's something that's $1.1 million. That is from the developers. So the developer will build it and we'll take it on once it's completed, and then we'll depreciate it starting at that point. I'm going to hand it over to Brent, who's going to talk about some of our upcoming projects.
Excuse me, before we get down
Yeah.
those details, as I recall, we have an undergrounding fund
We do.
that, and could you just talk about that for a second, what it is and what the criteria are and how much money there is and how does it show up in the budget?
Yeah, how much money is in that budget, John, for the
About
underground fund? 2.9.
2.9 million.
Okay, in our,
Just under 3 million.
yeah, we had 60,000 budgets for last year, and we're rolling over, I think, 40 million this year in that budget for a project, but there is some criteria tied to that. And mostly, we haven't used it in the past, we've just been holding it for projects that come up for downtown or.
And there's actually a criteria list that the commission adopted back in 2008. And you have to go through that criteria to use that fund. And it's about I think the fund is 0.5% per year is what goes into that fund, out of the electric rate.
So we,
Still not sure I understand what the funds for.
It's for converting from overhead to underground.
Oh.
so we distribution signs on their overhead, you want to move it to underground.
And part of the criteria for using that fund is there other contributions to help offset those costs.
You can team up with another business, a business downtown or another developer coming in. If it benefits us, we bring that forward to the commission and you can make that decision whether we want to contribute that fund to that project.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm just going to go over a couple of the highlighted projects in each of the divisions under the light. So the first one is in the transmission budget. So one of the projects that we're going to be doing is replacing a wood guide critical structure on the Wallace City tap line. So that is about 4 miles of transmission that we take delivery from BPA out by Highway 47. And it goes to our Baker Creek substation in the northwest part of town. So Embry is on that, and it's a critical structure that has guys on it in a field. We're going to replace that with a self-supporting steel monopole that is going to be designed for future additional capacity as well for both transmission and distribution and communications.
So go back one slide, Brent. So what Brent's talking about is these wires right here. And with the new steel monopole, you won't have any of those wires. And those wires are typically what gets hit by people. And in a transmission situation, that will mean a lot of people out of power for a long time. And so what we're trying to do is reduce the number of those types of poles we have so that we reduce that risk.
These will be identical to the West Second poles you guys put up a couple years ago.
Yeah, and that's actually the picture he has is West Second. That's the pole on the north side.
Oh, yeah.
So we have identified 5 separate phases of what we'll call the Wallace City Tap Reinforcement Project, that same section of line. And so in the 25-26 budget, we're going to be working on phases 1 and 2, which we've identified 3 other critical angle structures as candidates for steel pole replacements, and are also working to increase the capacity through reconductoring and additionally provisioning for installing distribution underbuild and fiber communications on that. So this was part of the line that we purchased a few years ago from Bonneville. And by taking it over, we can rebuild it kind of to our specifications.
Would you explain what underbuild means? Because I'm sure people may not know.
Building distribution lines under transmission lines on the same poles.
So higher voltage is on the higher point. So that'll be the 115,000 volts. And then underneath that, we will put 12,500 volt. And that's what we distribute to transformers within the system. What we call the distribution transformers.
So the high stuff's going to the substation, the low stuff's going to the houses.
No, actually, the way it works is the high stuff goes to the substations and then the low stuff comes back out of the substation because that's what the transformer does. It transforms it from 115,000 to 12,400, which is what we distribute to the system. to the individual transfer.
And wasn't the other reason we bought that from Bonneville is that we could make these improvements so much cheaper than they would have done and charge us for them?
And maintain it much better. So that we actually, right after we purchased or took over ownership of it, we went through and completely cleared out the right of way and cleaned it out because it was so overgrown you couldn't even get down to the poles.
And one other project is on the southern end of our system. We have 14 old transmission poles between our Boothman and Gormley substations that are slated for installation this upcoming spring. Moving into the substation budget. So we have the 3 Mile substation that's planned in the southeast part of town. So we've budgeted for the purchase of a transformer for that and the property purchase. And additionally, at our East McMinnville substation, we're working to simplify our metering with Bonneville through doing some improvements there. So we're going to be installing a new metering point and doing some work in conjunction with BPA. In the distribution overhead budget, we have some pole replacements and conductor upgrades planned. So between our Baker Creek substation headed north, we're going to be reconductoring to improve feeder capacity to the north. We're also going to be building a new feeder line underbuild on the transmission headed south into the Wallace Road area. So that's going to be an additional feeder tie for some resiliency in that area. And then just kind of normal system maintenance. What's that?
You might explain what a feeder is.
Feeders are going to be the main lines coming out of the substation. So before they have split off to feed like individual streets or something, they're going to be the main high capacity lines.
So if you think about your house and you have a breaker panel in your house, you have a main breaker, that would be our substation. And then you have all these little other breakers, those are your feeder breakers. So we do that to isolate the system, because if we had it all interconnected and we had one thing happen, it could take the entire system. So it's designed to sectionalize so that we don't take everybody at one time.
And so for our wood poles, they have kind of a nominal 50-year lifespan. And so for routine maintenance, we need to target replacement of about 2% of those. And so we're budgeting for 120 poles a year to be replaced next year. For our distribution undergrounds, we have broken the projects up into 4 categories. So the first category is older cables that are buried directly in the ground that are not in conduit. So replacing those is typically going to involve boring in conduit or getting some other conduit path and then pull wire in. So we have 3,900 feet of those projects budgeted. The second type of project is going to be unjacketed cable that is already in conduit. We just need to replace it with a newer style jacketed cable. Bring some props.
So this is what he's talking about. This is jacketed underground cable. And then this is actually jacketed underground feeder cable. That would be like what would go into residential areas. This is actually coming out of substations on major ties.
Another type of project is new feeder construction. We expanded the Baker Creek substation a couple of years ago, and we're still building new feeders to get the maximum capacity and operational flexibility out of that. So we've identified 3,000 feet of new feeder construction related to that. And finally, we have substations that have existing feeders that are starting to age out. So we've identified 2,000 feet of replacements to keep those.
And so typically this type of wire has roughly a 40-year life. If this was overhead, you'd look at 100 years for that wire. And the reason is this the orange or red here is the insulation that insulates the conductor from the ground. And this over time actually develops microscopic trees, and then it loses its insulation value, and then it fails violently, and it goes from here to this outer jacket and fails out to ground. So this is why underground is much more expensive than overhead. So you can't see this failing, you can see things in the air. So that's
It's more resilient to trees falling into it though.
it is more resilient to trees.
What do you got? So that's what I have. I'm gonna hand it back to Steve to James, unless you guys have any questions for me.
All right. All right, water division. So we have goals for the water division as well. capacity, reliability, resiliency, safety, water quality are some of our goals for we're talking about water division. Our criteria, age, number of failures, capacity, material types, a big one, and then watershed management. So when we're talking about our projects, again, we're thinking of these criterias and how it kind of plays out and how we schedule these projects. Some quick facts about the water division. We have 6,350 acres of watershed. Our 10-year average for timber revenue is 2.7 million. Up there in the watershed, we have 2 raw water reservoirs with 3.5 billion gallon capacity. Our water treatment plant is rated for 22 million gallons a day. The side note, our transmission lines are only rated for 15 million gallons a day. So you'll hear a lot about finished water transmission main upgrades and so forth. That's to up that capacity for a transmission main. Down at Fox Ridge, we have storage of 22 million gallons. We have 12,500 meters within our system. Water use throughout the year. We got 3 million gallons a day in the winter, which is fairly low, and it swings quite a bit up to 11 million gallons a day in the summer. That's the irrigation, those kind of things. The water loss that we track every year, we have 6.5% water loss for 2024. Our goal, which is the state goal as well, is to keep that under 10%. On the average over 5-6 years, we're probably around 7.5%. So we're doing pretty good on the water loss piece.
What's your major contribution to that water loss?
What's our major contribution?
What are the factors that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the state lines out those factors for us. So what we're looking at for the water loss, and when you look at that 6.5%, it's really theft and unknown leaks. So if you have a big fire, if you have, what else do you have? Like any kind of flushing of the system maintenance, that's all, we deduct that out of there.
Yeah. Okay.
And the water use, does that include Lafayette's usage as well?
It does. That's, yeah, all the water that's metered is included in there. So, and we're required to meter all the water. So. All right, we have 36 miles of transmission main. So the transmission main is what's coming. It's the bigger pipe is coming out of the water treatment plant. We also have transmission main going throughout town. We have 162 miles of distribution pipe. Out of the transmission main and distribution, we have 70% of that is ductile, which is really good for a water system. We put a lot of emphasis on upgrading our system throughout over the last 50 years. There's been a lot of work. As John said, our water crew does a lot of the replacements ourselves in-house, which is a huge savings. And Steve will talk a little bit about that, but they really focus on getting rid of the cast iron. We used to do the AC asbestos pipe. Now we're focused primarily on replacing the cast with the ductile.
Most of the AC pipe has gone out of our system. The only major pieces I think we have left are the transmission main.
Yeah, we have a little bit in town, but most of it's up on the transmission main. Yeah. And then as a note on here also, it's kind of for bragging rights. In 2023 and 24, we did receive best tasting water from AWWA. We're going to go for that again in April, so we'll see how we do in that one. All right, so for the capital budget here, we're looking at, Steve's going to talk about the first 4 topics: the water source, the treatment, transmission, and distribution. That's where all of our capital projects are really wrapped up into. The capital inventory piece, that $350,000, that's meter replacements. So that's what we budget each year for water meter replacements. The general, that's the same as for electrical. We're going to talk about that in the next few slides for IT budget, fleet, and facilities. And then the kayak, that's 2.9 million. That's that contribution in aid for construction. That's a high number for us for water. That 2.1 million of that is for zone 2.
James, could you talk just for a second about the long-range planning that's going into the sizes of the transmission mains that are being replaced coming down the hill in light of the potential for expansion of the water treatment plant?
Sure. So I'll try to make it short, but we have our watershed yield is 30 million gallons a day. We want to make our water transmission main the same. So we're trying to upsize that transmission main. So right now we have the 24-inch, and then we have a pipe that runs parallel to that for the majority of the line. That's between 14 and 16-inch. We're upsizing that 14, 16-inch to 36-inch. So we finished phase 1 and 2. And we're looking at doing phase 3, which Steve will talk about in a little bit here. And we put a lot of effort and time into that. We have an alignment figured out for that 36-inch. So we've done work on that. We talked about pipe types, pipe sizes for that, so it's all gonna be 36 inch. We may use ductile, and there may be some areas that you can use HDPE, but we're really gonna try to focus on the ductile pipe. And yeah, so that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, sort of at a more basic level, though, isn't it correct that when we put in the new water, when we expanded the water treatment plant last time, we made it so the piping is already in, and it's gonna be easier to expand it with 2 more bays, so we'll,
Oh,
water treatment plant will
I'm sorry, I thought you talked about the finished water transmission main, the water treatment plant,
Yeah.
that is correct.
so that's gonna be up to 30, and that's why we're putting in the 30 million gallons a day amount of pipes going down too. So we're sort of leapfrogging ourselves, we're putting the bigger pipes in first, but with the idea that we're gonna have to have that size when we have to expand the treatment plant, so we don't have to go back and redo the piping coming down the hill.
That's correct. So this, for like, kind of put it in perspective, like we talk about 11 million gallons a day, that's a lot of water. Our pipe in, that's a peak. So that's not consistent. That's a peak that we see in the summer months. And we did our water conservation plan. They're projecting in 2041, our peak would be around 15 MGD. So our plant can produce 22. So we're good right now. But as we do at McMinnville Water Night, we plan ahead quite a bit, and we want to make sure that we can do that. So we do have steps in place, phases for upgrading that plant to 30 MGD to match our watershed yield.
Yeah, the only thing we need to do to the plant, all the piping is set up for 30 million gallons a day. We just need to add filter 7 in,
Right.
and then we're ready to go.
Just a few minutes.
Yep.
We'll get there. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Steve, who can quickly walk through some of our capital projects.
So water source budget, the water source is McGuire Reservoir to Haskins to the water treatment plant. We plan on doing the McGuire control building power system upgrade, so the basically the controlling valves communicating back to the water treatment plant. There's solar and there's batteries in that building as well. The log boom is for the McGuire as well. That keeps woody debris and stuff from getting into the dam outflow. The treatment plant itself, we've got the backwash pump, which the plant was upgraded in 2010. That backwash pump is, we want to replace that and then rebuild the existing pump so we have a backup at one of the shelf. The chlorine generation system, we only have one. We want a redundant system for that as well. Land purchase for the future water treatment plant, which is down here off 3 Mile Lane. Program logic control PLC, the control system modernization, those PLCs now are approaching 15 years, and that's about the end of life. Flocculator bearing and shaft replacement, we actually here are the settling bases. We actually rebuilt 2 of those, and there's 4 more that we need to be rebuilding. For transmission, we talked about the 36-inch transmission main. We are going to actively get easements for the entire 8 phases. We've already got 2 phases done. So we're going to get the easements for all the rest of the phases, and then look at the 26, 27 budget for look ahead for basically phase 3 construction. So that is from Fox Ridge down to Baker Creek Road. And then the distribution budget. Our goals, I think we already talked about this, 1,000 feet of pipe a year. We focus on cast iron. We focus on failed areas, which often is cast iron. And we focus on water quality. So projects this year, of course, the Zone 2, we talked a little bit about that. 13th Street, we had a water main break there. We're going to replace some cast iron main. 27th Street, that's in our master plan. We're going to replace some cast iron main in that area. And then Alpine, we're actually connecting the dots. We've got new main on both ends of Alpine. We want to connect the dots to get that finalized.
Adam, yes, a quick question in regards to the water main breaks. We don't budget for water main breaks, but we do have $600,000 in there for our in-house projects. And there are times we can use some of those funds where we can team it up and make it a larger project if the pipe meets those criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Any question?
No. Wow. You planned
The
that.
purchasing manager, Chad Hudson, are you ready?
Good job, you guys.
Oh, I think we got a little bit more.
We'll make this better.
Oh, okay. Can we go after lunch?
Can't go early.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna talk fleet and facilities real quick. The goals for a replacement schedule is safety, reliability, and minimizing replacement costs. This criteria actually below. We're looking at age of the vehicle, maintenance costs, needs change, as operations change. We look at resale value as well as miles and hours, and we're looking at replacing the fleet vehicle. Just some quick facts there. A rolling stock, we have 43 fleet assets broken down in different items. Light duty is what you see the meter readers in. Medium duty, we've kind of standardized on a F550 platform that a lot of our water service and our one-man buckets operate on. And then the heavy duty is something like you'll see right there in a bucket truck. Equipment, trailers, we have 17 each. Off-road equipment would be an excavator, tractor, anything that's not licensed to be on the streets. We do have 6 standby generators. All summed up, we have 80+ fleet assets. And we have 2 awesome mechanics and servicemen to maintain that. In addition, we have 90+ small engines, tools, and equipment that they maintain. Oops. The fleet budget for this next year highlights, we're looking to replace that excavator you have picture right in front of you. We're looking for 2 excavator breaker attachments, one that would go on this particular machine here. And we also have a mini excavator that does not have one. We would use those as jackhammers, get the people off the jackhammers and put them on a machine. We're also looking for 2 pickups, one half-ton crew cab and one mid-size, which would be used for a meter reader vehicle. And then also looking for a 15-passenger van, which would be something new to our fleet. Procurement challenges, availability continues to be a problem, especially on the fleet side. There's allotment programs going on, and we're not a huge utility, so we're on pretty limited allotment. So that is a challenge. And then rising costs, just like everything else. That was the fleet. Any questions before we move to facilities?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna be talking a lot about facilities, so I'll be back to the table here in a little bit. But the goals of our facilities to maintain and improve facilities to meet the needs of our current and future water and light operations. We look at age, need, efficiency, adaptation to evolving work environments as we look to improve our facilities. You've seen the quick facts before. A lot of you probably have in some of my presentations. In 1988, this facility was constructed. In fact, that's a picture right after construction. Way back in '88. See the trees there. In 1988, we had 5,000 water and 8,200 electric meters. You pan down to the bottom of that list, 2024, it gives you some updated numbers to kind of see the growth that we've had. Generally, quick facts, I guess, is we haven't done a ton of major upgrades to the facility since 1988, and I did list some of those there. And tonight, later on, we'll talk about that 2025 design of the facility master plan and what that looks like, which is going to be a large part of the budget for the next couple of years for the facilities. So the project highlights for this coming year is architectural and engineering services for phases 0.5 and phase 1 of our facility master plan. The other line item includes construction manager services pending approval by the commission. That would be a line item in the budget as well. Facility master plan is phase project delivery. You'll see more of this as well, but just for informational purposes, I highlighted what all the phases look like. So the commission kind of has an idea. We'll revisit this here shortly. So. Questions? Okay, I'll turn it over to Thad Woodworth, our IT manager.
I'll try and do this in -4 minutes. So the goals for IT are for the information technology networks, in priority to do confidentially And then integrity and availability, where our operation networks, we focus first on safety, integrity, and availability. With that in mind, on some of the highlights from our capital projects on this fluid and still preliminary budget is we are focusing on continuing substation switches and fiber resilience. Firewall redundancy at both the headquarters here and up at our water treatment plant. And then upgrading our communications resilience to the treatment plant, where we have a radio telemetry point-to-point network from here to High Heaven to the treatment plant. We're going to upgrade that link. Next is our outage management system that allows for real-time outage awareness, both internally and externally. And finally, for our Fox Ridge reservoirs, where we're going to look into upgrading the doors, the sensors, the cameras, and the alerting system. Pretty short and sweet, but any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Are we done?
Yep.
Okay, so let's close the budget session. Before we start the other unwrapping that code. Okay. Okay, so it is 5:06 and we'll call the regular meeting of the commission to order. We have minutes over here. So we have 3 items listed on the consent agenda. Would any commissioners like to remove any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay. No? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? If we're ready, are you guys all ready?
Yep, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so. Are we okay? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes. Included in the packet are accounts payable and purchasing reports. Are there any questions on these reports? Nope. All right. Hello.
Hey,
Okay.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Is the Associated Arborist, is that our monthly bill with them, or is that?
It's Associated Artists, they bill us once a week, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so whatever happens, so it could be, sometimes could be 5 weeks, sometimes be 4 weeks, depending on the month.
Oh,
Spend a lot of money.
Yes. About $1 million.
You just add that to your staff.
but,
Okay, so
we've never thought about bringing that in-house or anything.
We used to have it in-house, but that would require a pretty significant increase in staff.
Gotcha.
and insurance. I don't know.
Yes, some insurance, but also, PERS doesn't have considerable cost to the staff.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and as I recall, it was also that this is more adjustable as we need.
Yes,
As we need more, if we need a lot, for some reason, we don't have to gear up and hire a bunch of new people. If we need less for some reason, we don't have to.
Okay.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. We have a new employee to be introduced, Will Martinson, if you want to.
Come on down.
Yes,
How you guys doing?
he's joined us.
Hello,
as a-
Dean.
You like me here?
He's a groundman. in
Nice
the
to meet you
electric
guys.
industry. And you've been with us since what, 2024, October?
Yeah.
2024?
Yep, October.
Okay. So to Will, so it's just to you, will you tell the commission a little about your background, and then we will have the commission introduce ourselves to you.
Sweet. Yeah, I grew up right off Highway 99 in Rickrell, so just a few miles south of here. I grew up on about a 4,000 acre grass seed farm. So I spent my younger years, about till I was like 15, helping out my grandfather with the farm. We sold the farm and I just went to Dallas High School there. And in 2021, I attended Northwest Lineman College in Meridian, Idaho. Graduated there and took a traveling transmission line construction job. So from I guess, February of 2022 till October getting hired here. I kind of traveled around between Idaho and Florida and back and forth a few times doing just overhead transmission structures and substations and whatnot. And kind of lucked out and landed back here at home and plan on being here for a while. So happy to be here. Yep.
We'll introduce ourselves to you. We start with Adam.
Adam Garvin, new to the commission, was appointed in December. Before this, I served 2 terms on city council, 2.5 years as council president. I'm also board president for the new McMinnville Fire District and operate an automotive company here in town.
Sweet.
Hi, I'm Tom Tankersley. I've been on the commission for a long time. And I really enjoyed it, really enjoy the staff that we have, and I agree with you. I think it's a good place and good people to work with. And I'm retired. And I wonder if you could tell us for just a second, what does the groundman do?
The groundman, I just assist the linemen with whatever they need, keep the trucks stocked and well working order, and kind of try to keep tabs on everything that the lineman or the foreman shouldn't have to worry about.
And then this is a step, hopefully become a lineman yourself.
Yes, sir. Yep, that's the ultimate goal.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kim Morris, and I'm on the commission because I'm the new mayor. And in my personal life, I'm an interior designer and have grown up in McMinnville and appreciate everything Water and Light does.
I'm Danny Elmer. I'm newly appointed as well. I've been in McMinnville 25 years, grew up in the area my whole life, on some local businesses, and really, as Tim said, really value McMinnville Water and Light, and I really like what they use. I'm happy to be here as well.
I'm Lisa Macy Baker, and I was appointed in December as well. And born and bred, left for a bit and returned to raise my family. Worked for Visit McMinnville, involved in various community service projects around McMinnville and some nonprofits as well. And it's been ingrained in me since I was a wee child that this is the best water on earth. And I pretty much agree.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Can you introduce who? you
Gene
are?
Croston, the electric superintendent.
Okay, I haven't met you yet. So.
Been there for about 16 years now,
Okay. So.
and half new to my position too, so. Yeah.
16. Well, thanks for coming and introducing. Oh, do you have questions?
So Gene started as a lineman, right? And then was
Yep.
then foreman, and then when Scott Rosenbaum retired, took on the superintendent.
Great.
I would just add, we talk about how great the water tastes, but I can say the power's probably the best power in the state too.
Yeah, cheapest.
And not just that, but resilience. I've lived on PGE before P-Vine and was without power for 13 days. And I think normally you can anticipate your power coming back on within an hour, hour and a half when it goes out here in town, for the most part.
So I gave the commission one of these, so to go to your point, you look at the SAIDI and safety numbers. Our safety number is 0.32 and the average is 1.33. And the SAIDI number is 37 minutes and the average is 342 minutes across the US. So that's what that means. And that's what you're talking about.
So thanks to the lineman crew and Gene and your staff.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have a really good group. Yeah. That are dedicated to being here when they need to be here.
They do a great job.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for what you do and welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be a part of it.
At least 16 years.
Yeah, I hope so. Longer if I keep it up. Good deal. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we have the consultant and partner reports. Brent Keller, our forester. So please update the commission on forest management activities.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as far as 2024 separate sales go, the The 300-401 road sale was a 2-year sale we sold last year. Boise Cascade looks to start harvest operations here in the next few months. Need to get into a little road work, weather permitting, and then they'll get going in the spring. 550 road number 3 sale from last year was, of course, a 1-year contract. We did get in and get that entirely planted before the weather came in. And so it remains, as far as reforestation goes, is interplanting in various units that we need to get the stocking up to par on. And we've been delayed due to snow on that. But looks like the snow's come off at the lower elevation units, so they're gonna start in there tomorrow. That, and then as the snow recedes, we'll move to the higher units. Part of the game we have to play too is our cooler can only take so many trays, so we gotta get it cleared out, then get the next 40,000 trees in there later this week or first of next week, and then we'll be all set. So
What do you anticipate planting this year for the total number of trees?
I think 70,000, something like that. Seems to be about what it's been. Yeah, that is important to we stay on top of that with our stocking surveys in the fall, and then following up with the interplanting, because you don't spray herbicides in the watershed, which is a industrial tool that's commonly used that makes it a lot easier to attack the competition, and we don't have that option, so it's extra important we get in right away and plant, and then stay on top of any of the mortality we have from weather or browse or whatever, and get those planted and stay on top of it. So that's one of these folks will ask, how do you manage plantation without using herbicides? That's one of the key things, is to stay on top of the interplanting. That goes back to working with Bill. We used to talk about that all the time.
You always plant the same variety of tree?
And we are collecting as it's convenient. We used to do it a little more formally, but as it's convenient. If we happen to be cutting timber when the cones are in the right season, which is like late in summer, we'll gather cones we're doing that on the older timber. I don't know in 50 years that you do that, because you'd just be collecting cones that were originally from a seed orchard. But for now, when we have the older, like more native timber, it's nice to collect cones from that and then get those seed from that sown. And so we're planting back some of the native trees.
But we also do plant a little bit of cedar too, right? Not just Doug fir.
Yeah, we'll plant a certain amount of cedar. We used to do some hemlock, but it is 95% native Doug fir, so that kind of mimics naturally is not a lot of diversity out there. So.
What causes most of the loss?
The combination of
Deer
there's some browse with the elk and deer. We've had where we planted one day and the next day go out, the trees are pulled out from the deer, or not the deer, the elk. Deer will browse them, but the elk will just pull them up. They'll just pull them up and leave them, and not even eat them. I do kind of have a rule that we don't interplant the same plantation in the same week. We tried that once. Oh, we'll just plant it again today. Well, then they pull them up that night. It's a case. 2025 slippage sales. We had a spectacular outcome to our bid opening last Wednesday. Stimson bought both sales. They were the high bidder on both. One thing to note here is these are some of the highest prices we've had in the last 20 years. This is not our nicest timber, even by our standard. It's a little more of a variety of sorts, more open grown, not as much grade like peelers in it. So I was very pleased to get these kind of prices.
How many acres are each one of those?
I'll have a full rundown of the value and the acres in next month's letter, but it's between the two, it's roughly 90 acres for the two. So they're 40-50 acres apiece.
And do we care that it's going to the same, both sales are going to the same person? It looks like the previous sale went to 2 different people, or no pros and cons to that or anything. I mean, they definitely were paying the most by a long shot, but
the only thing that could potentially be tricky, but not worth not doing it, would be, and in this case, it wouldn't be as much of an issue anyway. The prices are real similar, but you could have, you really need to pay attention to how you're managing the loads going out. Where you've got the same buyer shipping loads from the same, but they're not real close to each other, so.
And
That would be
these-
something to watch.
The wood in these sales is different too, right? Some is large, some is.
Well, the 350, that's the one I was really concerned about. It fits some folks really well. And some not so well, as you can see by who bid here. But the 350 had 2 units, and one unit had like average 38-inch trees. And one had average like 24. So that isn't gonna fit many folks directly for both. But it does for Stimson. So they'll take that small log to their Forest Grove mill, which is a stud mill, and then that larger log will go to Klatskanai, where they don't really have a size limit, and they cut a lot of cross arms, they cut large timbers and stuff. So I was happy to see that they were excited about it, because some folks, like, it just doesn't work. They could take the one log, but then they'd have to pedal the rest, and so there was a little risk there. I wasn't really, after driving by that stand, it's right on the Boundary Road for 30 years. I didn't realize just how big it was till I cruised it, that there's like some 60-inch trees in there. And so, and also not like peelers either. So it was rougher 2-saw stuff, which fits some folks good, but like Herbert can't really get on board with that. There's not enough grade in it, so.
So Sean, could you talk just for a second, please, about the rules around our bidding process, and whether we would even have a choice to sell to somebody because we didn't want the same person getting.
Well, to be frank, you you've never adopted a policy, strict policy for rules around bidding. Your rules are essentially what you're willing to accept. We put out a solicitation that says we're accepting bids. And we put out the solicitation together with the contracts under which we'll accept a bid. But that really forms the basis for the parameters of how you bid. But this is not a public contract in the sense that we're procuring something. We treat it sort of that way. We want to be fair to everyone. And we advertise like we would a public, like we're buying something. But this is not a procurement. So it's not being processed under the public contracting laws per se.
Okay, thank you.
I think what's written in there, we don't have to accept, we can reject all bids, accept any bid.
And we've done that, right? Bids were just too low, and we said, well, we don't need money for debt service, let's just wait till the market.
Yes, but in large part, it's the integrity of the commission. The buyers are expecting a certain format and a fair process. And you as a public entity have that general obligation to provide a fair process. Thank you.
Yeah, you could run into a political issue there if you accepted a lower bid when somebody's put their best foot forward and done all this work. And my fear then, even though you have the right to do that, was are they going to come back and bid again? Because there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And there's getting to be less of them all the time. So.
Any other questions?
But then nothing other. There's nothing more on the letter than I refer to the memo here on page 40 that shows the rundown of the bids. That we had 8 bids for that 730 sale, 4 for the 350. 730 is more appealing, more of a similar sort, a little nicer timber, and obviously fit more folks well. But my recommendation is to accept those high bids and award both sales to Stimson Lumber Company.
So maybe have you had any other bid openings where the prices have been like this?
I was looking back, 2022, that's the highest we've had in the last 20 years. Bill would always remind me that 96, Frank paid 1,200.
I remember.
And so I'm always, well, let's check these prices out. He'll be like, well, it's not the record, so 950 is what Stella Jones paid in 2022. A lot of polls. It was like 60% polls in that. Incredible.
That was the
Power line east.
Yeah.
The 2 power line units. And then in the last 5 years, I think the next highest prices was, I think Herbert bought the 140 sale was in the 800s. And one of the other sales was real high, but I don't know that we've got 2 sales in the 800s before.
for this quality of work.
Especially because I'm seeing a lot that doesn't actually show on paper here, because between the sort difference, the size differences, and then the lack of grade wood in there. But also speaks to the lack of supply, out there, right now. There's just not, the housing market's not good, the export market's not good. Those are usually things that would indicate that the domestic market would not be good. But there's just not a lot of supply, so folks have to pay to get wood to run their mills, so.
Yeah, having said we don't rule, I think actually there is a clause in our public contracting policy that speaks to our sales, but I think it's a pretty thin rule. Basically says, well, we will publicly advertise the sell to the iPhone. You could look in your, it's on your
Easier to ask you. Sam.
right. But it's a pretty, doesn't hold us to much more than I think than advertising and selling to the highest bidder.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. No, you have a question.
Yeah, just one question.
Sure.
On these pricing, this is, we net this, like we have no other expenses. There's no, do they pay for the road improvements? They pay for all the logging expenses. We pay for the reforestation.
You pay for the reforestation, you'd pay your consultant. You pay, like, but you don't pay the harvest tax. The buyer pays that. They're paying for the logging, the hauling, and then all the road maintenance that cost. There's money built into these sales.
Okay.
That pays for that. So to answer your question, yes, this is net.
This is a net. Okay. Yeah, that's a good price.
So I was just talking to somebody earlier. They said, "No, are those delivered prices?" I said, "No, that's after all the costs, because these reflect more like an $1,100.
That's $1,100-$1,200 if I was selling.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Brent, sometimes you throw in they're required to salvage timber up in other parts of the tree farm, right?
Yeah, usually we don't usually run them clear around the tree farm.
No, but-
where it's adjacent. That's always kind of poked in there, like, hey, you have to. There's 10,000 feet of salvage that you'll have to get to. So.
Any other questions? Okay, so we need a motion to award the sales. So Sam, can you read the motion to it?
I'm going to suggest a motion. This is how we're going to. Motion to accept the high bid from Stimson Lumber Company of $826.31 per 1,000 board feet for the 730, 190, 100 road timber sale, and accept the high bid from Stimson Lumber Company of $842.02 per 1,000 board feet for the 350 Boundary Road timber sale, subject to the issuance of a notice of intent to award, no protest being filed, to direct staff to prepare the necessary documents, including contracts, bonds, and notice of intent to award, and to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the contracts upon receipt of the required documents.
Okay, anybody want to?
I'd like to make a motion as presented.
Okay, so Commissioner Garvin, and do I have a second? Second. Commissioner, can I just say Macy? That's what I'm always going to say. Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Sam. That was a lot to read.
I've written it shorter.
There were no appearance requests tonight and no staff reports this evening. So new business, the first item under new business is a public hearing for an exemption from competitive bidding for a public improvement. I have a script. Here is my script. It is past 5 p.m. on February 18th, 2025. Time scheduled for a public hearing on an exemption from competitive bidding under the Public Contracting Code for the office expansion, remodel, and warehouse seismic retrofit project. The commission will consider an exemption to the requirements for competition in procurement of construction of this public improvement. This exemption would authorize an alternative contracting method, specifically a request for proposal process to select a construction manager general contractor. As mayor, I am the presiding officer and will conduct the hearing, impose reasonable time limits on participants, and receive documents and reports into the hearing record. At today's hearing, the commission expects to hear a staff report and may hear from staff consultants. During the staff report, I may recognize other members of the commission or interested persons to ask questions of staff. After the staff report, interested parties will be invited to comment. Before commenting, please state your name and address for the record. Because we are operating in a hybrid digital format on Zoom, I will now provide a brief overview. Any interested party that has joined the Zoom meeting is automatically set to be on mute to have their video display hidden. At the appropriate times during the meeting, I will ask those in attendance whether they would like to speak. When this occurs, please select the raise your hand option from your device. When you have selected raise hand, the staff person managing the meeting will note your wish to comment. I will recognize you before you ask a question or make a comment. If you are having difficulty using the raise hand feature, you may also use the chat feature. If using the chat feature, please note your name and address and confirm that you wish to ask a question or make a comment. If you're calling in via a phone, please wait until I ask if there is anyone on the phone who would like to ask a question or make a comment. The commission may also have questions for the interested party. Staff will be offered an opportunity for a final comment. I may accept documents into the record. And finally, the commission will deliberate and consider the proposed resolution. Mr. Hudson, the purchasing manager, will begin the staff report. Welcome, Chad.
Yes, thank you, Karen.
Yeah, as mentioned in the introduction, staff is seeking an exemption from competitive procurement in favor of an alternative contracting method. The construction manager, general contractor, or CMGC, as we'll call it from here on out. Through written resolution for phases 0.5 and phase 1 of McMinnville Water and Lights OpEx expansion and remodel and seismic retrofit project. The exemption would allow staff to competitively solicit CMGC contractors through a formal request for proposal process where we can use a qualification-based selection criteria. As opposed to the traditional design bid build, which is generally based on low bid. Pricing is generally the sole determinant in award. At last month's meeting, you may remember that we had MW&L, McMinnville Water and Lights architectural team here to present a PowerPoint presentation. Sam Justice does have some copies of that presentation, hard copies.
Have you had coffee for a minute?
Coffee would be good. There's some over there. I'll direct you to page 5, or you can also look at the screen here as well. Wanted to kind of highlight the different phases of the project that we're looking at an exemption for. Phase 5, which was really driven by a commission direction, was the warehouse seismic retrofit. So that's going to be the first part of the project, as well as a new transformer yard. The stormwater drainage improvements, as you can see, there is in our yard as well, kind of in that the seeds and the graveled area. If you go and like days like today when it's raining, there's a lot of ponding out there, a lot of water standing out there. So we look to improve that. And then also D for phase 0.5 would be required frontage improvements, which we don't exactly know what that is. We're anticipating potentially some sidewalk area needing to be installed, but we'll see. Phase 1 of the project is an office building, the building that we're sitting in. We're looking to make some additions to it. We're looking to add meeting space and office space. Our meeting space is, we're at critical levels now. When we have all staff meetings, I'd like to take a photo. I think I mentioned this before. We were crammed in a break room. So we're looking for that. We're also looking for renovations of this building to update the interior, also do a seismic upgrade of this building. In conjunction, we have new parking lots, landscaping, and signage. Would also like to mention something that's not captured on the screen that you're seeing here. Is MW&L is currently starting a study that's going to evaluate the potential addition of the warehouse by seismically upgrading the warehouse through expansion, through bracing. So they're gonna do this report, and they're gonna come back to us, Water and Light, with findings, results, and we'll present that in front of the commission. If the commission opts to at that time, we could potentially expand the warehouse, which currently is in phase 3. So that would move that phase 3 expansion of the warehouse into phase 0.5. I just wanted to highlight that because it's not captured on that. On your screen here, it is mentioned in the memo and also the finding of fact report that's in your packet.
So it was the plan already, it would just be moved up to get
It would
done.
be moved up, yeah.
And the idea would be there that we reduce the cost of the seismic retrofit for the warehouse and put those dollars into the expansion.
Okay, gotcha.
And there's nothing planned for that field where the frontage road is, it's just a field and it's gonna stay a field.
Currently, yeah.
Oh.
And that may at some point be transformer storage or material storage or something, but right now it's just, it's just currently field.
And the frontage improvements, I would ask that the staff talk to city staff about not requiring that red dotted sidewalk in the D area for a couple of reasons. One, that property is not affected by this project. Two, I think that for safety reasons, you do not want to encourage people to walk along in front of our driveway where the big trucks come out of and such. And three, I know they already made us put one in front of us, but that dead ends because I don't think they want people walking down that'd be the west side of the road into the park. They want people walking down the east side so that they don't end up crossing and having a problem. So, and finally, as I understand it, a concrete sidewalk has a fairly heavy carbon footprint under the present technologies. And I think that doing this would be contrary to the city's and Water and Light's environmental goals as well. So, thank you. And you know, if we needed it, I'd say sure, but so if you could ask them to do that, please.
Can I add something to that? As somebody who runs frequently over here, not right now, but will be again once this is healed. It would be if that's the recommendation, then some safer crossing on the opposite side. I mean, we talked about this, but that would be
Especially with the
so that to
CrossFit there.
encourage the traffic, the pedestrian traffic on the other side.
One thing
Yeah.
we may want to talk to the city about too, which I was thinking about, is we may want them to reduce the speed on Riverside, because once you go past Marsh Lane, it goes up to 45.
Yeah, and if you're a soccer parent or a baseball parent and you've seen now the exit, there's a lot of traffic on Saturdays.
And the other concern I have is watching traffic come up the hill. They are not doing 25.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have that exit right out here, which is actually kind of a blind until you get out far enough to see down the hill.
Yeah.
Which bothers me too.
Yeah, reduction and if you think about too, yeah, we have a dog park. We have there's quite a few people who utilize the bike lanes out here as well. So
And the track kids come out to run the hill.
yeah, I'd love to see that a safe crossing there to encourage that path.
Yeah,
That
they
would
walk
be-
down the
Having
street.
like a blinking yellow or something?
Yeah,
Or
a
even
crosswalk with a
just a
blinking.
crosswalk, you know.
Yeah.
marked
Even a
crosswalk.
marked, yeah, but even the solar powered blinking yellows, those are.
I mean,
We
just
put
even
some of those
lower
in
the
over
speed
at the
limit, 'cause
beach.
people
And
get up to 45 before they even get to them.
they're relatively inexpensive.
Well, John, if you see this, if you can see the sign, then you're allowed to speed up to that.
Right,
speed,
that's what, that's what.
Once you can-
that's
once
what-
you can see
that's
the
what
sign,
people-
right?
That's what they do. Maybe a little head too far ahead.
The Industrial Raceway.
Yep, it is.
Okay, so where are we?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all great. Yeah, so we're looking at MWA's presentation for last month. I would also like to mention that Steve Olhaver from MWA is here. If you have any questions as we go out throughout this process tonight. A written resolution and finding fact report is as identified as Exhibit 1 is in your packet. We presented the finding of fact report, a draft report to the commission last month. By statute, we were required to publish that finding of fact report for 14 days prior to this public hearing. Also included in your packet are affidavits of publication for the News Register and the Daily Journal of Commerce. They have the dates on there. We also did post this. We directed everybody to our website, and that's where we posted the finding of fact report. So I just wanted to highlight that.
And Mr. President, have we gotten any comments, any written comments?
We have received 0 comments. I would like to highlight some of the finding of fact reports, some of the findings in there. There's a lot of them, but I would like to extract some that I think are really pertinent to this project. Number one, the exemption is unlikely to encourage favoritism in awarding a public improvement contract or substantially diminish competition. So we will be going through a formal procurement process on this. It won't be a bidding process. It'll be a RFP process where we are taking formal proposals and awarding based on qualifications. It will be formally advertised, just like we would if we were doing an invitation to bid. That process will remain the same. And once, if and when we get a CMGC on board, when we get to the point of bringing on subcontractors, the CMGC will be required to get competitive bids from those subcontractors for that work, including any self-performing work.
And we have a right to see those too.
And it's open book policy, so we do have a right to see those. Number 2, finding is exemption will likely result in substantial cost savings. So the idea of this is to have a team that works through this together. We're going to have an architectural team, we're going to have owner, water and light, and we're going to have a CMGC walking through this process. The CMGC would be an active member in design and assisting with constructability reviews, hopefully translating to fewer change orders once we get to construction. Guaranteed maximum price, the GMP, change orders generally cost less. Design bid build contractors generally will mark up 15% on change orders as opposed to CMGC markup of 5-10%. And that's just kind of industry information. Number 3, the award of a public improvement contract under the exemption will likely result in other substantial benefits to water and light. I think this is really where we make a lot of our hay. This is a specialized product or project. We have a specialized rehabilitation of a pre-engineered metal building. We're going to be doing seismic retrofit on that. Office building and the office building will have a complete renovation and addition while we're in operation, which requires a contractor or CMGC that has that specialized experience to navigate us through this process. CMGC will be able to do exploratory demolition and constructability reviews during the design phase, which should reduce risk and unknown conditions during construction. This can be done, as I mentioned, during the design phase. And then safety is huge as a utility. We're going to be doing construction activities while people are coming in paying their bills, while people are coming to work. So we need to make sure that we have the CMGC on board that has a very good safety record and has completed similar jobs while successfully completing similar projects. So safety is a huge one in that regard. So in conclusion, staff is recommending through written resolution an exemption from competitive bidding in favor of the CMGC alternative contracting method in accordance with ORS 279C 335 for the construction of the office expansions remodel and seismic retrofit project, and to direct staff to formally advertise requests for proposals, evaluate said proposals, and bring a recommendation for award of the CMGC to the commission at a later date. That's in brief.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions? All right, are there any interested parties in the room that would like to speak? Is there anybody on Zoom, Trina, or on the phone?
There is not.
Well, okay. Mr. Hudson, do you wish to offer the packet materials into the hearing?
Yes,
Records?
please, Mayor.
Okay.
Pages 41 to 51 of the commission packet, please.
Okay,
And Madam Mayor, we'll also offer this, the materials that were offered last month and we presented again this
Okay.
month from MW&L.
perfect. All right. All right, so we have a motion to do.
Yes, if you're ready to consider a motion, if you want to deliberate at this point, you don't have to, but if you're ready for a motion, I can read it.
Okay, any more deliberation?
Just restate what I said last meeting was. I have concerns around the process, but I understand the complexity of the project and happy to move forward with this model. I just want to make sure we do extensive reference checks on whoever we go with.
And before we proceed, do I need to close the hearing before we do the motion?
Yes, you go ahead and close it because we've admitted all the evidence.
Okay.
We've heard everything. We'll close the hearing and you'll deliberate if you need to, and then we'll
Okay,
present the motion.
so I'm gonna close the hearing at 5:46. Okay. Deliberate. Here we go. You're
Okay.
on.
So this is the
Oh,
motion to be
perfect.
this, so that you would be the motion to approve resolution number 2025-1, a resolution by the City of McMinnville's Water and Light Commission to approve findings and to grant an exemption under the Oregon Public Contracting Code for the competitive bidding requirement to use the construction manager general contractor contracting method for the office expansion, remodel, and warehouse seismic retrofit project, and to direct staff to formally advertise a request for proposals, evaluate said proposals, and bring a recommendation for award of CMGC contract back to the commission at a later date.
All right,
I think that you want to ask Ms. McManus to poll the commission.
yes. Trina?
We just need a motion and a
Ah.
second.
First, that's what I was waiting for. I thought, well, maybe I can.
I moved to.
Okay,
Before I get
so
that stated.
Commissioner Elmer, and then I need a second.
Second.
Commissioner Tankersley, and now Trina, can you take a poll?
Yes. Mayor Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Yes.
Commissioner Elmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Macy Baker.
Yes.
All right, it passes. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's go back to where I was here. Next item is a request to update the City of McMinnville Partnership Framework. I invite John Dietz, our general manager, to present this agenda item.
Sure. So in 2023, we did a strategic plan and identified a item where the city manager and the water and light general manager would communicate with both the city manager with the commission and the general manager with the city council. That would happen 4 times a year, and then there would be 2 meetings per year with both bodies. So we have done that since that time. What we've found is that we probably don't need to do that as often, and so what we are recommending is 2 times a year with the general manager and 1 meeting with the board and the city council. And the city is recommending the same thing, or Jeff is recommending, the city manager is recommending the same thing.
We need a motion for that too.
When you're ready,
Okay.
I can work this. We also have a general manager's job description where this is actually was inserted into the job description. So we're seeking a amendment to that. So this
Okay.
would be in two separate motions. First motion, a motion to revise the partnership framework between the commission and the city council, reducing manager reports between the council and the commission to semi-annually from quarterly, and reducing the frequency of joint meetings of the bodies to one per year from semi-annual.
So moved.
Okay, so that's Commissioner Tankersley. And second from Commissioner Macy Baker. Any further discussion?
Just clarity, the only thing we're changing in the contract is what you redlined.
In the, are you speaking to the job description?
Yeah.
Yes, the job description is the only change is what's red line. That's correct.
And then on the one joint meeting, do we anticipate that to be like a extra long meeting, or it's gonna be a standard like 2 hour joint work
It
session?
would be a standard.
Standard meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item is personal services contract for an electric. Uh-oh, what did I do? There's two.
Yeah, there's two. Second motion is motion to update the general manager job description as presented and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the job description.
Okay. Motion.
So moved.
So I have Commissioner Garvin, and did I hear you over there? Sure. Commissioner Macy Baker. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Can I move on, Sam?
But yes.
Next item is personal services contract for an electric cost of service analysis. Invite Trina McManus, utility rate analyst, to present this agenda item.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. This evening, I'm presenting the staff recommendation to enter into a personal service contract with Utility Financial Solutions to perform an electric cost of service analysis and rate design. McMinnville Water and Light has typically aligned our electric cost of service updates with BPA rate cases, which usually occur every 2 years. However, the next BPA rate period has been extended to 3 years to carry through the remainder of the current 20-year contract. The new BPA rate period will go into effect this year on October 1st, 2025. UFS has provided MW&L with cost of service analysis and rate design since 2011, and Mr. Beauchamp, the president of UFS, has over 30 years of experience in the utility environment. It's necessary to update our electric cost of service model on a regular basis to include current power cost information and assure that McMinnville Water and Light is recovering costs, O&M expenses, and risk. Some additional items that we've included in this engagement, besides the updated rate designs and long-term financial projections, are an updated lighting study, review of our transformer rental rates, joint use pole attachment schedules, and a review of the industrial customer distribution charge. Staff recommendation this evening is to award the personal services contract to UFS to perform the electric cost of service analysis and rate design for services that total $32,500. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Does any commissioner have any questions for the clerk?
So we currently have this model, but it's through BPA. Is that who?
So what
she's?
No, what we have is, UFS will do the financial model. We will get new rates from BPA. They will use that in the financial model to develop our rates.
Oh, I thought she said they were the ones. Do
We
we
just
have anybody?
follow BPA's rate
you
periods
just
because
follow
that
it.
is such a major driver for what impacts our rates. So we try to just mirror those same timeframes for their rate periods.
What's different about this time is the BPA rate period is 3 years instead of 2 years.
Okay.
So, because that will then align with the end of the contract term, and we'll start new contracts in 2020.
But we will still have a rate setting process here in McMinnville by the commission once a year, right?
Correct.
Correct.
but he'll give us the information we can use for the next 3 years.
Right.
Okay.
And we can always go back to them if something significant changes, but generally once BPA sets their rates for either the 2-year or the 3-year period, those usually don't change within that time. But if that or something else does shift within that time frame, we can always ask them to go back and refresh the model.
Any other questions?
So if we go forward with this, how soon would they start and how soon would we have this information to?
So I would start working with them as soon as we execute the contract. They have a lot of data requests and information that they need to feed into the model. The commission probably wouldn't hear preliminary results until July. So I would work with them for the next 3 to 4 months to get everything into the model. We would go back and forth with different requests and questions, and then we would have something to present in July.
Typically, we constitute rate increases October 1.
Okay.
Yep.
Which aligns with with our rates from BPA.
And to talk to the commission about how this works, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, the commission has the authority to set the rates, and we don't have to follow this necessarily, or we just have to set a rate that will recover enough money to run the system and keep it maintained. So, and years ago, I went to one of his presentations at one of the national conferences, and I'm sure he's sorry he said this with me in the room, but he was real clear that these studies they do, they try to be accurate, but it's not science. There are some assumptions, and so you should feel free to look at it, use it as a starting point. Staff will help you analyze it, and then ask questions, because there are assumptions in there. I've forgotten the one that I always argue with them about, but that we need to consider. So, but this is a big help, because we really wouldn't, before we started using him, it was sort of, well, this is what we've always done. Yeah, that we don't want to raise that rate too much, and then things got way out of whack. Some people were subsidizing other people in customer classes. So I found this to be a useful tool, but he doesn't just tell us what the rates are, and that we don't look at it as him telling us what the rates are.
Right, and I guess the other thing to keep in mind is unlike Portland General Electric customers, they have a rate process. The rate process goes before the Oregon Public Utility Commission. You are what's known as an unregulated utility. So you're not governed by the Oregon Public Utility Commission. You are the utility commission. So you are the rate making authority for the city of McMinnville's electric system. So you're the corollary to the Oregon Public Utility Commission. And as a municipal utility, you operate that way under state law and under the city charter.
Okay.
And finally, one little thing about the process, they will make a preliminary presentation, and then several times, including last year, I think, the commission has looked at it and said, I hear what you're saying, but we think that this rate ought to be phased in. And so come back with, or we're concerned that you're not raising rates enough. So come back with a different rates track based on this other assumption. So the commission should feel free to sort of, if this doesn't make sense, we have a chance to send it back to them before they come with the final rate resolution and schedule for Sam to read and for us to consider.
And we did that last year with water, didn't we, Trina? We looked at 2 different rate tracks.
Yeah, I think we looked at a 3% and a 5%, and we showed the revenue impacts to both of those scenarios. And then the commission gave direction on which track they wanted us to pursue. During COVID, we did the same thing. We did a rate track where we did 1 year where there was no rate increase. And then we did one with the normal increase and kind of showed the different impacts that those would have.
Do we anticipate any on-site meetings?
Not in the cost that is estimated there. If we did want an on-site meeting, it's an additional, I think last year it was $3,000 if we want them to fly out. Otherwise, it'll be Zoom.
Yeah, I saw that it wasn't included in the cost. I just was curious if we anticipate to need an on-site meeting and
He used to come in person and we used to pay for that, but since COVID, he hasn't been on site. We've just continued with the Zoom. It seems to work pretty well.
sounds good.
But
Thank you.
I would suggest that after this time on Zoom, if the commission feels like they really need to see him and talk to him and have him here, the next time we have a rate deal, which I'd probably be what, water next time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you should say, well, let's spend the money and get him out here.
And he does, I think Trina, you've been to his presentation, right?
Yes.
Rate making, because he's
Yeah.
been to Portland before, and so if that does happen, and I've been, I think Tom's
Where's he
been,
from?
Yeah,
there may be opportunity for some of the commission to go.
he often, especially the APPA, he
Yeah.
often has a presentation there that I found useful.
I'm pretty sure he is in Michigan, but
Oh, okay.
over 300 days a year, I think he's in a different state. Like he is just always flying.
Yeah,
all
he does a lot of different utilities.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, the rest of my questions were around the travel expense if we pay in portal to portal, or when he talks about a 50% reduction in hourly rate, it's still 180 an hour if we're
Yeah.
paying him from the time he leaves the house to the time he gets home.
All right. Any other questions? Sam?
And here's the motion. Motion to find most advantageous to Water and Light under the Water and Light contracting policy and award a personal services contract to Utility Financial Solutions LLC to perform an electric cost of service analysis and rate design for not to exceed maximum price of $32,500 and direct staff to prepare the necessary contract documents and authorize the mayor and clerk of the commission to sign.
Do I have a motion for that? Okay, so Macy Baker and
Second?
Commissioner Tankersley. Any additional questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trina.
All right, are there any commissioner comments for tonight? We want to,
Hey, General manager.
Yeah, I did have.
did I skip you?
Yes.
Oh, John, you talked so much tonight. I just didn't want to talk to you anymore.
Wore you out, huh?
Yes.
I did want
I'm
to
not all
talk
here tonight.
about water and.
Okay,
In particular, Dayton, because I know there's
yes.
something in the
Yes.
newspaper, so I wanted to go into a little more detail on that. So this is a map that we've been using. So. I got plenty. So maybe just a little bit of history on this. In 2019, Water and Light and Lafayette signed an agreement for McMinnville to supply water to Lafayette. In 2020, we constructed a 24-inch HDPE line, so high density polyethylene pipe from the end of our system to an abandoned well on Highway 18 that Lafayette then built a pump station at. That pump station, then they take that water and they pump that from that site into their system. So that's kind of small, but that's that little red dot right here. That is the pump station, okay? When that pipe was installed, we installed a T at that location for future extension of water out towards Dayton, Dundee into that area. So there's a T on the end of that pipe now. So fast forward to today, Dayton has a well field and it's on this map. And that well field is a shared well field off of Airport Way. There's 5 wells in that well field. Currently, it's only producing about 200 gallons a minute for 5 wells. That was a shared well field with Lafayette and Dayton. This last summer, Lafayette did not take water from the well field because the production of the well field has dropped significantly. So Dayton has approached us about supplying water to them. What they're looking at is extending the 24-inch line, so the dabbed line here to essentially just past the Dayton Lafayette Highway,
between Dayton Lafayette Highway and Ash Road, tying into an existing PVC transmission line that's owned by Lafayette. Because originally the water went from Dayton to Lafayette. Now the water would go the opposite direction. Okay. And essentially then supply water to their service reservoir, which is in Dayton. So essentially they don't need to put a pump station in because all they're doing is taking the water, opening a valve and dumping it into the reservoir. And so they don't need a pump station because then they would pump from that reservoir out to their system. So that's where the pump would be, to pump the pressure in the system. And so essentially what they would need in the interim is they would like Lafayette to supply water through that pipe, through their current pump station.
Okay.
And so what we would need to do in that instance is we would need to amend the current agreement with Lafayette because it does not allow them to resell water. We would need to put some type of meter in to see how much water is going from Dayton or from Lafayette to Dayton. So that's kind of where those conversations are right now.
And the meter and any infrastructure would be at Dayton's expense.
Correct. Yes.
Would we have to finance that?
We have not gotten that far yet. So we would have to extend the pipe about 2,000 feet to get to that current transmission line that serves the service reservoir. And it's a 14-inch pipe, I believe. So
What's
there's
the cost per foot on?
this with what was you remember what the cost per foot was?
Around $600.
Yeah, probably around $600 a foot. So about pretty substantial, but
They're gonna have water too.
then they would have water.
And then, John, they're also talking about after this interim solution, having a contract with us to have us sell water to them rather than have to go through Lafayette.
Correct. Yeah, eventually what they would like to do is to split that, and that's why we would have the line run all the way to the transmission main to tie that in.
Will it be a seasonal thing or are they just gonna abandon their wells?
I think that I don't know. They might keep them, but the quality of the water is not very good.
Yeah.
It's got they have methane scrubbers in the water to actually get methane out of the water before they can even treat the water. And so that water from the well field is then brought into Dayton and it's treated at the service reservoir before it goes into the service reservoir.
And our line, the main line going in there, that capacity is not a problem to
No.
meet the needs of.
So
all of
when
this.
we put the line in, we put in Lafayette asked for a 12-inch main. We installed a 24-inch. And McMinnville installed that additional capacity at our expense. So essentially that has the capacity of 4 12-inch mains, 24-inch. And we did that anticipating that at some point there would be a future need.
So,
Good.
so I would like for us to, at some point, as we move forward with this, if we do move forward with this, have sort of an in-depth conversation about the contract with Lafayette, the potential issues with others and such. I think it'd be really worthwhile for the whole commission to know. Just real briefly, the agreement with Lafayette not only says they can't resell water, but there's a limit on how much water they can take. And the idea being that we didn't want, our capacity, because the problem is our capacity. And so there's a limit on how much they can take. And then the idea was that when we get the Willamette source completed, then this agreement will end and we'll have a new contract and they'll pay kind of based on what it costs for that water. But
And I'd probably add to our current agreement was for 21 years.
yeah. And the rates that we charge Lafayette are based on the rates that we charge our customers. And they pay 1.5 times what our customers pay. And the reason for that is that the past commissions haven't wanted to be in a situation where we had to justify rates and have pay outside lawyers and experts to come in and explain things and have a hearing on it every time we wanted to change the rates. But on the other hand, we realize that these other cities don't want to be in a position where we can take advantage of them. And,
Sure.
and it's gotta be it's gotta be good for both of us. And so what we came up with was, if like Lafayette, you guarantee you're gonna take a certain quantity of water every year, you pay 1.5 times the rates that our customers do. If you don't guarantee that, then you pay 2 times. And the reason is that they're using that part of our capacity that it'll be very expensive for us to replace. And this way, it's more than reasonable for them to think, well, McMinnville is not gonna cheat its own citizens, its own customers to jab us, since we have since these other cities, that's such a small portion of our output. So we're better off, they're better off. In dealing with Carlton, they've always wanted to negotiate something different, and we spent a lot of money on outside lawyers trying to negotiate with them. So my suggestion would be that staff take the position with Dayton that, we're going to use the Lafayette contract form. And if that doesn't work for you, we're really sorry to hear that, but we're not gonna do something different. So then we've got to go back to Lafayette and say, well, you've been a good customer, but they've got a different deal. So
Sure.
I would just suggest that staff do that, and that we, and Dayton has the advantage there of saying, well, this was something that was negotiated by a city and it's actually working well. I think Lafayette would say that, so.
I think so too.
And I would also add, the contract does have a minimum in it too, it's
Yeah.
$1,000. So if they don't take any water for a month, it's still $1,000.
Yes.
And
So-
are they anywhere close their maximum that they take?
I think the last time I looked, you remember, James, around 250 gallons a minute, I think, and the max, their peak is 500. Yeah, so they've got quite a bit of headroom.
And when do you meet with them again?
Actually, I have a meeting my next meeting. I don't have a meeting scheduled for them again. I know Lafayette and Dayton having joint meetings scheduled, I think, in March to talk about how they would work out a deal to supply water on a temporary basis. But I am working with the COG. I'm working on a meeting for a regional meeting with the smaller cities to talk about water.
Okay.
You mentioned when Lafayette went in, they paid for the 12-inch cost, and Mac Water might assume the upgrade cost.
Right.
So is Dayton gonna be on the hook for any of that difference in that?
Well, they would pay a percentage based on what size pipe they want.
Okay.
So if they want, they want a 12-inch, but we install a
Are
24.
you talking about the transmission that's already been built?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good question. So that was always my understanding, that as other people use it, they would owe us that capital cost.
So
That's probably with a time value of money factored in as well, I would think. The LGIP, right? Yeah.
Okay.
But then we've got a long way to go with
Yes.
negotiating, so we'll see where we're. So anyway, just an update on what's going on with the water, and that's where we're at with them. We have had conversations also with Union about supplying water as well.
Yeah.
So I haven't had any recent ones, but
Hmm.
it's been a few months.
And are they still looking at bringing water out of Washington County too?
Yeah, I think they are, but
Told me they were looking at you,
so.
but we'll see.
And then the other item I had that wasn't in there is the mayor and I will be in Washington DC next week.
You gonna straighten them out, John?
Yeah. Good luck.
Okay, are there any questions, comments, commissioners, have anything you want to bring up?
I have something really brief, I promise.
Okay.
What you've seen, this is sort of looking forward as to how the commission would function with staff. What you saw tonight on that budget thing, I thought was really useful.
Mhm.
And the way it came about was one of the commissioners, Kathy Tate, suggested it. that because it was too hard to look at the budget all at once. The commission said yes, and staff then produced this very helpful yet evolving product for, for us to look at. So I would encourage you to remember that. And if somebody has an idea of how we could do our jobs better, to bring it up, and the commission would discuss it. And then if we and staff could say, well, we can't get there from here, or they'd say, yeah, we can do that. And then we would, and staff will hopefully, I think they will, based on the past, produce something that will help us do a better job as a commission.
Anything else? Thanks. No, that's good. Okay, there are financial information in your packet. I don't know if anybody had any questions on that. I think it's pretty much what we already looked at. I always like what they give. Anything there? No? Okay, we'll now be going into executive session. There is no further action to be taken by the commission this evening, so we will not be returning to open session. I'll ask General Counsel Sam Justice to please read the citation to us in executive session.
So we're going to go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records that are exempt from public disclosure under 192-18. Under ORS 192-345-3, dealing security measures to protect individuals, buildings, property, and information processing. And ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub P to consider matters relating to cybersecurity infrastructure and response to cybersecurity threats. If you have any media with us this evening, are instructed not to share any information that is made available on the subject matter of the executive session outside of the meeting. We will not be returning to open session for any further action during the meeting after going into closed session.
Okay.